Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my overview, or I guess revisit, of the Callisto Protocol. It's a bit of a slower week at the moment, but this came out almost to the day actually, to the week let's say, 2 years ago. And I thought since we're kind of coming back to the overview videos, I'd throw a little bit of spice on the fire, because I think this is one of the most underappreciated and kind of unfairly maligned, at least nowadays, post-launch issues, games in recent memory. Like, I'll plant my flag now and say I love the Callisto Protocol. I really enjoy it, but there was a bit of a Swiss cheesing of problems. Everything kind of lined up in such a way that this kind of had a pretty awful launch, and it got piled on really hard. So I thought, look, now is as good a time as ever to come back, have a look at it. 2-year anniversary, deep sale because of, the Steam seasonal sales. And look, at the end of the day, it's easy for me to just recommend to you the 90% games that everyone recommends. So here's my controversial pick, especially if you are into sci-fi, Dead Space, and we can get into that as well because this is kind of a spiritual successor to Dead Space. But if you like all that sort of stuff, gritty, dark sci-fi, action, horror, man, this game is absolutely for you. Don't just sleep on it because some talking head on YouTube had told you to. So yeah, I've ducked back into this and had a bit of a play, and I still love it. I will tell you this much, on the back of objective statements, this game at launch was a fucking mess as far as performance goes. I can't speak to consoles, but PC definitely. Now look, I obviously had lower hardware at that time, and these days I'm running pretty shit hot, right? So running this at 4K on a 40 series, this thing does not skip a beat. It doesn't drop frames. Whatever they've done, they've patched it, they've fixed everything. And like I said, at the time, the contemporary hardware, whatever I was running on 2 years ago, this game was kind of nightmarish to run. Huge issues, and look, it might have been because of the way it was doing upscaling or whatever, but you had issues where you couldn't even read some of the UI text and all that. So yeah, it had a rough, rocky launch, but that part of it is resolved now. Now look, I'm not excusing it. That's, to me, actually is the biggest, worst thing about this game is how poorly the launch went performance-wise. But like I said, you're watching this video now, I'm recording it in 24, so maybe it is time to go back and have a look for yourself. I also mentioned that it's a spiritual successor to Dead Space, and it doesn't help that it pretty much launched on top of the Dead Space remake, which came out, I think, the following month, January the next year, or thereabouts. So they pretty much released next to each other. I don't know how they managed to do that, because yes, two things can be true. I love this game for what it is and what it's doing, and I'm glad it exists and it stands apart from Dead Space in many ways. And yes, I absolutely loved the Dead Space remake as a humongous Dead Space fan. Two things can be the same. Two things can be true. But a lot of the original OG staffers that made original Dead Space are actually on this team, Callisto Protocol. So in some ways, this is more a spiritual successor to Dead Space than the Dead Space remake, being that I'm not actually even 100% sure who handled the Dead Space remake. Look, they did a brilliant job and I loved it, but it wasn't like the OG crew. So that's a little bit of a setup. The releases being so tied together, I'm not really sure if that was EA using bully mechanics with the Dead Space release, intentionally releasing next to this, or maybe the Callisto Protocol guys thought it would work in their favor to release next to Dead Space, but my God. At least with hindsight, it was a terrible idea because the Dead Space remake took existing mechanics, everything, and not just graphics, they built upon the original formula. In every way, it is a tremendous success story of remakes done right, much like Resident Evil 2. Callisto Protocol does things differently. In many ways, you could say dumbed down or more AAA-ified, which I actually really like what it's doing. But if you're going to try and compare the two of them together, it's going to lose. And I think that was a lot of the framing around this game. Anyway, you can see from the art and the aesthetic, and it's beautiful, by the way, all the world design and that. Oh my God, very, very cool. But it moves like Dead Space. Another sort of speculation I have, not that I'm trying to carry water for this, but it is interesting to explore how something essentially gets piled on from a million angles. death from 1,000 cuts even. But I'm telling you, if you're playing this with mouse and keyboard, you're playing it wrong. It's so very clearly, deliberately designed for, console perhaps, but thumbsticks definitely. Booting it up now and just moving along, there is a lumbering, sluggish feel to it, which I like, but again, I lasted about 2 seconds this time from when it let me start moving with the keyboard to realize, no, this is not good. So you just cannot play it with keyboard. But on that, the whole sort of lumbering mechanics, it has a big focus on this melee system, which is unconventional. And again, melee is not really Dead Space. So the entire framing of this game's release was how it wasn't Dead Space, and the stuff it was doing differently was either simple or people didn't like it a la bad. And the melee system is the big controversial thing, because here's the take. Apparently this is nutty to say, but I think the melee in this is really cool. It's very original. It's very AAA in that it's a diluted, simple mechanic that anyone can pick up. Like, it's not going for hyper indie or super high fidelity skill ceiling stuff. It's not trying to be some sort of Souls-like huge interplay dueling mechanic. What this is much more mainstream kind of dueling as well, because a lot of the time you will square off one-on-one against monsters in a melee situation. Now that changes as the game ramps. You get guns and bits of gear and all that, but for the most part, a lot of the guns are used to soften the melee fight that's about to happen. So maybe you can pick off one or two dudes to make it even. Or like as a sort of combo chain follow-up, you kind of shoot dudes as a finisher. So there is shooting, and it gets more emphasized as the game goes on. But the heart and soul of this is this melee system, which kind of flopped at release for being too simple. And again, I don't know, man. I feel like if you were using mouse and keyboard to do this melee system, it would probably be miserable. It's so built with thumbsticks in mind. To give you an idea, essentially the way that you will do an engagement is you'll square up with this enemy. Well, at least I can only speak for myself, but this feels like the natural flow. Is you kind of let them telegraph, let them swing, and ultimately you just lock the thumbstick left or right? And your dude will go into like a cinematic dodge. It doesn't really matter, like if he's swinging with the left hand or the right hand, doesn't matter, right? You just hold a thumbstick across and you take in sort of an evasive maneuver. And as enemies get more complex, you get faster dudes, brutes and all that, they might actually have a bit of a canned combo. Maybe they do 2 or 3 swings. And the thing is, to evade in this, you essentially are guaranteed an auto dodge if you hold to a side, left or right. But if you want to dodge sequentially, like the next one, you have to flick the thumbstick across to the other side and hold it in the other direction. And so there is this kind of flow state that once you get your head around it, it's pretty kind of no-brainers, but it's fun. It's low-level engagement, and this is what I would expect for what I'm kind of coining at the moment as AAA gameplay. Fairly inoffensive, accessible to all, but still fun gameplay loops. And so you might have dudes have a 2 or 3 swing, and you basically let them get through their combo. You do your kind of rhythm interplay, left, right. And then when they've tired themselves out, you wail on them with your combo, right? And then, because there's monster alien things, they'll have their arms and legs blasted off, and they can potentially evolve into different states. And then rinse and repeat. You let them have their swings, let them have their fight. And then it gets quite frantic when you're dealing with multiple creatures. And look, I won't defend it because this system works at its best in a one-on-one situation. It's good dopamine feedback, and it gives you a little bit of engagement you still have to pay attention to. But once you start kind of getting mobbed by multiple dudes at once, it does fall over a bit. So while I like the melee system, I think it's really clever and really original, I feel like this game groans under the weight of its systems being tested more than most. And we've talked about this before. Most games, through the curve that is start to finish, by the end, the difficulty can become unpleasant in some games because the developers push their system to 11 when it probably should only go to 10. And then it starts to really show the cracks even to, lay cavemen like you and me. You're like, oh, this isn't actually fun. It was fun, but now it's starting to break and buckle because you're stressing your system too hard. And by system, I mean the mechanics of the game's systems. Anyway, look, it's a great sort of sci-fi thriller by the numbers. One of the things I really noticed playing through it now Like, all the graphics hold up, obviously, but all the performance capture is wonderful. All these recognizable actors. But whatever you want to call it, the direction at the actor level is clean, right? Notably, this sidekick dude, this Elias bloke that's helping you, hey, bruv, I'm going to get you through here. He's kind of dumping short, punchy, directional, driving dialogue. Like, it's not like overdone. It's actually very clean and well acted. And it feels like, I don't know how else to describe it, because I am very bitter and twisted when it comes to voice acting in games, how it feels like that bloody Critical Role show. A lot of the time it feels like this is my moment to shine. I've got the microphone and I'm going to try and steal the show, as opposed to being in service of the player and the cohesive experience. And I'm not really interested in you, dear actor, and by extension, game director, giving this actor their shot at a bloody Academy Award. So all the little interactions in this are like really well acted, really punchy and short, honestly, and they keep the action going. It was just interesting seeing that. It was kind of a breath of fresh air. It's interesting what 2 years of modern game direction can do to you. Anyway, this is going on a little bit longer. I think this is an excellent game, and I think it holds up, or rather, it has stepped up. They've patched it, fixed it. Modern hardware runs it infinitely better, to at least the point where the performance issues seem non-existent, at least for me. And, you know, I'll plant my flag and say, instead of just piling on and saying the same soundbite as everyone else that the combat system's bad or whatever, I think it's different. I think it's really cool and really unique. However, in the later game, it falls apart a little bit, but it doesn't change the fact that this whole experience is really fun, and I recommend getting it, especially while it's on deep sale. Anyway, team, I might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.